E350TB asks, are there any oddball prototypes you'd like to see in model form? I'd personally like to see the Raven A2. Like I said, I love pre-grouping locos, and we're lucky that we seem to have so many pre-grouping locos being announced and released these days. It's fantastic that we're in a position in the hobby now that we do get to see that. One pre-grouping loco which I would love to see, and I don't even know if it's a one-off oddball, or if I think it was one of many, but it's just the only one that I know of is Gladstone, which is in the NRM, obviously. The LBSCR engine, just to be absolutely clear. So yeah, I can't actually. Do you know what? For the life of me, I now can't remember exactly what type of loco it is. But yeah, I think that would be a really cool one to see in ready to run form. And it would be good to have more LBSCR locos on the market as well, because we've got things like the Terrier. I think Bachmann did the E4 a while back, so yeah, and Gladstone I think would be a popular one. So if locomotion models are listening, up at the NRM, that would be great. But yeah. Hey, just joined and wondered, what is your favourite model railway company? Well, favourite model company. They haven't specifically said railway, but seeing as this is a channel all about model railways, I'm going to assume that this is about model railways and not about. I was going to say something very, very silly then, to do with models and not the type of models that you would normally see on this channel, let's say. But I'm going to stop myself there because this is a family-friendly channel. And I would get myself into hot water otherwise. Anyway, my favourite model railway company, specifically, I don't really have a favourite, to be perfectly honest. And I know that's a bit of a cop-out. I love them all for different reasons, and there isn't a single company that I even think, oh, that's bad. There's no company where I go, oh, I would never buy anything from them. I sort of think of all model railway companies on a fairly equal footing. Obviously, some are more popular than others. Like Hornby is obviously very much a household name in the way that a Curascale and Rapido aren't. Bachmann are sort of up there, but I still don't think, when I tell people who aren't involved in model railways at all that this is what I do for a living, or to a certain extent at least anyway, they always go, oh, you mean like Hornby stuff? So, there's that kind of, it's ubiquitous with, people think model railways and Hornby and it's the same, it's the same kind of thing. So, but I also think that a lot of the model railway companies have found their own niches of stuff that they do. Hornby, I think you could say, they know their market very well. They're doing, for double O gauge at least, they do big LNER steam engines with the occasional industrial and sort of oddball thing thrown in here every so often. But they know that their big sellers are LNER Pacifics, preferably named the Flying Scotsman, and they know that's they keep making those. For as much as everyone moans that they keep making different versions of the Flying Scotsman, they keep making it because that's what they know will sell. Similarly, I think you could say Rapido are very good at kind of doing, not necessarily oddball things, but kind of, sort of the things that you wouldn't necessarily expect. like we've been talking about, we've got the S160 on the way. They're doing a Manning Wardle as well. They've got the Caledonian Fireless locos, which is something completely different. They've got the O1, the SECR, so a bit of pre-grouping in there. They've got the Jones Goods, which is another pre-grouping loco from the completely opposite end of the country. They haven't really gone for stuff that just BR black locomotives, basically, that are fairly generic stuff. They're going with lots of little interesting things. Similarly, I think you could argue that Curascale are well known for doing big diesels. I know that they are branching out. They've got the Pannier, they've got the Buck Jumpers, they've done the Manor as well. But I think, if you say a Curascale to most people, most people think of things like the Deltic or the Class 37. They've got the Class 31 on the way as well. They've just done the Class 66, which again is a Hatton's tooling, which they've taken on. But yeah, I think there's an argument that different manufacturers fill different niches within the hobby. What do you think are the biggest advantages of TT over double O or N gauge? Well, we said N scale, but N gauge is the same thing. I kind of covered this in a video I did a while back, but I think they kind of with double O and N, they kind of, they're very different, and TT fits nicely in the middle. Obviously, you only need to look at the scale of it to see that. But what I think works really well with TT is that it's smaller than double O gauge, so there's so much more you can fit into the space. This is all obvious stuff, okay? This is an 8-foot by 2.5-foot board. We've managed to get 2 continuous circuits, an upper level which has an incline up to it with a big terminus station on it. We've also got a goods yard. There's a reversing loop with a tunnel and bridges and all sorts of stuff that we've managed to fit into that space, which in double O gauge, you just couldn't do that in this space. That's not to say you couldn't fit a double O gauge layout in this space. You absolutely could, but it would have to be either an end-to-end style kind of branch line terminus layout, or you could get a circuit on here if you used flexible track, but then you're probably limited to running like 040s and 060s. So the amount of stuff that we've managed to get onto this layout it's a much more interesting layout for the space, and it has a lot more possibilities than a similar double O gauge layout. A double O gauge layout like this would have to be twice as big and probably deeper as well. Now, the obvious counter to this is that, okay, N gauge is even smaller, so surely you'd be able to fit even more into this space. And yes, you can, but the problem is with N gauge is that it's a lot more fiddly. It takes a lot more time to get it right. Going back to what I was talking about earlier with N gauge, it's not that you can't build a layout, a consistent, well-running layout with N gauge. It takes a lot more work to be able to do that and to be able to do it well. Whereas with TT, the size is such that you get the advantages of it being small enough, but you also get the advantages of it being big enough to be sort of more manageable. And, putting something like the HST and these 3 coaches on the track is relatively painless. Doing it in N gauge is a bit more fiddly with the bogies and making sure everything is lined up. Similarly, even just getting the track all flat and lined, the tolerances are so much finer with N gauge. A millimetre out here or there can cause a derailment. On TT, it's big enough that you have a little bit more wiggle room with that. So N gauge is great, and 2mm fine scale and all that is fantastic, and it's a really, I'm really impressed by people who are able to build in that scale. It's fantastic. Having built N gauge layouts myself, or an N gauge layout myself in the past, I know how tricky it can be, and it's really impressive what some people are able to do. But I do feel like with TT, it's much more user-friendly and beginner-friendly. If you're strapped for space, if you don't have much space, and you're considering N gauge as your first layout, I think you're going to struggle. If you're considering TT as your first layout, I think actually that's a much better option. That's not to disparage N gauge in any kind of way. There are lots of advantages to N gauge. Obviously, if there are certain things you can model with N gauge that you can't with TT, just because the range of TT models at the moment is a lot more limited. So, swings and roundabouts. There are pros and cons to each, but I do think that TT fits nicely in the middle of double O and N gauge. You get the small size, which is obviously an advantage, but then the largeness of the size in comparison to N gauge is an advantage as well, because it just makes things a lot easier to work with. And I know some people say that there actually isn't that much of a difference between TT and N gauge. Having had hands-on experience with both of those, I would respectfully disagree with that. I think all 3 scales have their own advantages and pros and cons, and there's no blanket answer to this question. There's no easy way to say, oh yeah, you should absolutely go for TT, or you should absolutely go for double O, or you should absolutely go for N gauge. You have to do it on a case-by-case basis, because what might be really important for you, somebody watching this now, might not be as important for somebody else, or for me, or somebody. We all have our own differences which go into, as much as the preference of, the era and style and type of layout that we make, it's also just as important as what scale you go for, and all those preferences really make a difference. And so, yeah, I would just yeah, I would say I think it's great to have TT120 on the market. I think it fills the gap really nicely, and it's just great to have more options anyway. So, yeah.